All right, but let's get some feedback while folks hopefully trickle in. What were some of the things that you talked about? Yeah, Alex.
So we talked about whether the missions were justified.
Okay.
Not specifically just this one, because this one also had the context of trying to find Ferrera,
Okay, right.
but the missions in general.
Would you, what do people think? Is that all you talk? Say, yeah, sure.
So we talked about how Paulo Ferrera's argument that Christianity couldn't grow in Japan.
Right. Did we say what is Japan?
Um,
Swamp, right? They said.
And so we thought about I guess both sides the argument and where so Japan I guess the culture and even the language barrier has allowed has led to a different view of Christianity, and that view may not be what it was intended, but then there's still roots of this true Christianity, and that make them Christian. And then we also on the other hand we considered that the scene where the parents were baptizing their baby, and you really understand the true the meaning of baptism.
Yeah, is he in paradise now?
Yeah. And throughout just the whole movie there was that same vision of just going to paradise, that was the whole basis of Christianity.
Yeah, so a big part of the way that missions was presented, and this is actually true historically in Japan. You still to this day, there's only 0.1% of the population in Japan is Christian, unlike other colonialist missions during the 16th century. What did you make of based on what Darrell is saying about this kind of European misunderstanding of Japanese culture and faith, combined with the missionary activity? What's your sense, and folks online too? What is your sense of Alex's question regarding, were these missions problematic, particularly in the 16th century? What's some of the, what's potentially the problem here? And also, think of, in line with that, what Inoue Sama, the little morality tale that he tells, right, about the man with the 4 concubines. Yeah, Ivan.
The missions, I would say, weren't necessarily bad because they were peaceful.
Okay.
The Christian missions weren't necessarily hurting anyone, but also at the same time, Japan was a very isolated nation. There was a huge emphasis on purifying their culture, and they didn't want any sort of outside influence, and they weren't contacted. Purposely, they didn't want contact with anyone for almost thousands and hundreds of years. And so when all of a sudden they see all these different traders and European religions coming in, they see it as an invasion of their own culture. And so they try to preserve it, but in the end it just causes needless death.
Okay, so there's this concern of culture, right? What, if Inoue Sama is looking at the history of the Western missions, what might be some things that he's seeing that would make him think, oh, Christian missions are a problem? Yeah, Alex?
Well, I was just going to say, in response to Ivan's thing, that we should respect Japan's decision to close itself off. But I feel like today, if a country did that, it would be under attack and it would be called things.
Right, sure.
And so I think it's interesting that we have those two different views of that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, we're kind of in some ways praising isolationism here in the 16th century. But, I mean, is it really purely just isolation? I mean, what's one thing? If Japan is looking at the Western world and the history of missions, what is their concern?
That they're going to be
Yeah. So the history of missions is not without what? What's the I word that I'm looking for here?
genocide.
Okay, G would be genocide, right? Yeah, no genocide. I mean, absolute genocide.
Imperialism?
Imperialism, exactly. Right?
With the natives and everything.
Yeah, I mean, remember when Inoue Sama says about the man with 4 concubines who are all arguing and it's tearing the house apart. The house and the ruler is what?
Japan.
Japan. And does anyone remember what the 4 concubines were? Yeah.
Is it Portugal, Spain?
Portugal, Spain,
England.
England, and
The Dutch.
Dutch, right, Holland, right? And, yeah, I mean, what happened? Sure, Christianity, missions, Central and South America. What actually happened?
Slaughter.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, enslavement, right? Forced labor. Like, if Inoue Sama looked at the rest of the world in the 16th century and saw where Christianity was spreading, and saw that it was not just like, oh, nice little missionary priest. I mean, there was an element of that, right? But I mean, he's seeing the conquering of people. And to its credit, Japan, I don't think, has ever, not colonized, right? No, unlike everywhere else. And so, Inoue Sama, to a certain extent, has a point. He's like, I don't want these Europeans coming here and taking over Japan, or, either, I mean, that would be settler colonialism, but extraction colonialism as well, or just economic exploitation of Japan. Someone online, because I know we haven't, I know, Daryl, you wanted to get in, I just don't want to ignore everyone online. Anyone online want to add anything, or something that, maybe a new subject that you had talked about? What did you folks talk about in your groups? Nothing? You just sat and stared at each? Okay, Calvin.
Yeah. So we always talk. We're talking about like Father Ferrer, and if I assume if a person watching this and he's a devout Christian, he would probably see Father Ferrer as a sort of like I wouldn't say a traitor figure, but at least someone that kind of goes away from the classic Christian doctrine. But I mean, I'm not a Christian, so I didn't start watching this movie with a very clear protagonistic and antagonist view. Father Rodriguez is definitely the good guy, and the Japanese is definitely the evil ones. So I would say, when Father Ferrer comes out and he gives his little speech to Rodriguez, I would he has a point. Right?
Yeah.
Because I think what he is focusing on is he first tries to tell Rodriguez that Japan is just not a very suitable place to spread Christianity, and then he went on to introduce Japan has its own religion, its own form of spiritual belief, and I think he's essentially saying what matters is the good. Well, Rodriguez happened to believe firmly to the Christian sense that the good is God. He is trying to address that in order to reach the good, he needs both the good and the God. While Ferrer is offering a point where he sees in this swamp of Christianity where the seed cannot be the seed of Christianity could not be cultivated. He thinks it is okay just to come to a certain extent.
It's interesting. I'm sorry. Please continue.
So he shows Rodriguez his scar, and I think this is a very valid argument because I think it is very persuasive just to raise something that is personal to Rodriguez, who has never yet experienced what he has experienced.
That's a good point. Yeah. It's interesting. What Ferreira is encouraging Rodriguez to spare, right? To spare the suffering. Multiple Japanese Christians, right, being tortured, who have themselves already done what? They've all apostatized, right? And they're still being tortured, right? If Ferreira really wants to end their suffering, then he needs to apostatize. Now, in his European mindset at the time, what might he be worried about in terms of suffering? Is he thinking about present-day suffering, or what suffering is he probably have at the forefront of his mind? Why he's refusing to apostatize? Yeah.
Jesus' suffering.
Okay, he compares it himself, right, to Jesus, and Ferreira says, like, being proudful, thinking that, like, it's like they wouldn't consider themselves as like Christ, like, but you are. What might be another suffering? Think of Dante. Yeah, Darryl.
Eternal suffering.
Eternal suffering, right? He's thinking that, if you apostatize, you're going to have eternal suffering. A very 16th century mindset in some ways, which probably is not really exactly the case. It reminds me of our discussion about faith. What do you think what do you think Rodriguez thinks faith amounts to?
I would say like he amounts to like in your heart, like what's in your heart, because like I feel like I feel like a movie like the formality of just like stepping on a picture, like for a lot of people when that was like the end of like their Christian faith, but like I seen with I believe his name was like Ichijiro, he like stepped on it multiple times, and you could say that like his faith might not be true, but after every time he still like came back, which I thought was pretty.
It's kind of interesting at the end of the movie, right? Chichiro and Rodriguez, it's the same thing in the novel. They don't look like such similar figures at the end. And Rodriguez finally starts to realize that Chichiro and he are not, so dissimilar after all. They're both these apostatizers. Yeah.
What I thought was interesting is, like, at the beginning, when the people are like, should we apostatize? And Rodriguez says yes, do it. But also, like, the Japanese throughout the whole process of them apostatizing are like, it's just a formality, it doesn't really matter. And in that case, why even have them do it if it's just a formality? Like, I feel like if I was trying to know that people weren't Christian, I would want to say that this is a definitive statement of you're not Christian.
Well, what do people think about that? Anyone online? Did you hear Alex's comment? Like, why were the... yeah, Atticus?
It seems like that is just sort of an unnecessary cruelty. Just humiliation tactics, anything else by making them apostatize.
Yeah, I don't know. What do you think the word was for like Inoue-sama? Yeah, Toby.
I think the word, like the reason they did it, is not as much to have them just be like, yeah, I'm not Christian anymore. It's like internal suffering. It's like more, I think, mental. It's where if someone were to believe I am a Christian, but I did step on it, they feel guilty, and I think that eats you up more than just giving up your faith as a whole. I think that's the worst.
Okay.
Feeling like a bad Christian.
Yeah, that definitely was what was certainly going on in the Europeans' mind as well. Yeah.
I think that like the different like symbols of Christ like throughout the movie just held so much weight to these people that that to them like stepping on this physical frame felt like stepping on like an organic rock. Like even so when Father Rodriguez came and he was like giving out like all these different small pieces that like represented like Christ, and they held it like so dear, even if it was just like a single bead of the rosary.
Yeah.
So like to them the symbols of Christ like are almost like a direct like the connection with God, and not rather than what they represent. So therefore like them stepping on the like on Jesus.
Mhm.
Like they are actually stepping on Jesus.
Yeah, that's a great point. Does anyone know? Yeah, Zena, no, please.
In relation to what Daryl was saying, it's kind of like the symbol stuff that represent God to them. To me, I kind of feel like that's like their comfort thing. I was telling you and Tori, like, you know, how people hold teddy bears and stuff, to them that's like their comfort thing. Especially because like they're not like getting priests and everything, and they feel like they have to go to people to kind of like confess their sin. So I think like them stepping on that thing, that could be like someone's symbol that they always keep with them, so I think it can hurt them more. But then I also think that like the symbols they use or hold, like they have more faith in that than like faith in God himself like that, because like they depend on the symbol more than like just believing that God is there. Like,
Yeah, remember Rodriguez was worried about that, right? When he was handing out, he's like, I worry that they care more about these tangible signs of faith than about the faith in general, or as belief, right? And Ferreira basically reveals to him that probably was the case, right? Does anyone know the religious tradition Shintoism? No? It's really the native religion of Japan, and it's a natural. Right? Most religions in Japan are naturalist religions. We'll probably be talking about this a little bit more with Father Michael next year, but it's everything has a kind of everything is divine in some sense. And remember what Ferreira tells Rodriguez when they first meet up again. He says, they don't understand the faith in the way that we're trying. He's like, they're not Christian in the way that we're expecting them to be Christian. Remember what he says that Francis Xavier, when he first came to Japan, had to ask them. He wanted to preach the Son of God, but he had to first ask them how to refer to God. You remember what they told him? Yeah. Yeah, Dainichi, right? Which is, and then Ferreira points to the sun. He says, "Behold, the Son of God." And he's like, they can't understand anything beyond the natural world, right? Whereas, Christianity certainly has a metaphysical component, right? It's transcendent. And this is very true to similar to Buddhism as well, right? There's no divinity is not something separate, right? Remember Buddhism is get Father Michael next year, but Buddhism is a child of Hindus. These are non-dualist religious traditions. There's no difference between the nature or natural world and something beyond. It's all one. And so I can imagine that they really did have a sense that there was a very real spiritual quality to those symbols. Whereas the Europeans, their understanding of faith was very different. They're trying to preach a kind of understanding of faith that is just not going to happen. And that's what Ferreira was trying to say about Christianity not taking roots in Japan. But it's interesting though, what do you think Ferreira, Rodriguez learns about faith? When he comes to Japan, what does he think of faith as, and do you think his understanding of faith kind of changes over the course of his experience? How did we define faith in the beginning of the term? Is faith like a series of beliefs? Or assenting to a series of beliefs?
Isn't like